can we go to the beach tomorrow instead of school? It was only half a day. And just like that, I said, yes. I'm not sure who was more shocked, the kids or myself. They couldn't believe their luck. We got up early, but not too early, packed too much food, sand toys, blankets, towels, sunscreen, and drove to the shore. We found a parking space and started the short walk to the beach. As we're about to cross the road to the sand, we see a car coming towards us, so we wait at the crosswalk. The car actually slowed down and stopped, letting us cross. So we all turned to the driver to wave our thanks, only to see it was the boys' school principal. What a coincidence! What a coincidence. What a coincidence could either mean, oy vey, I can't believe I'm here with you, such as by the beach, or less obnoxiously, this is such a good luck. What a coincidence. Maybe it was even orchestrated. In any case, coincidences give us pause to think. How do I feel about this situation? How should I respond? And even, what can I learn? A lot of coincidences happen to Ruth. She happens upon Boaz's field, and now we'll see another coincidence. Just to recap what's happening, the concept of levirate marriage, yibum in Hebrew. Yibum is when a married man dies with no children. His soul is in limbo. There's no physical heir for his land and no spiritual heir to continue his legacy. No one to inherit him, to continue his ways. So a close relation, usually a brother, is required to marry the widow, and the firstborn child is the heir to the deceased man. He might be the biological son of the brother, but he's the spiritual son. His spiritual DNA is from the deceased man. As we said, since Ruth's husband dies without a child, a close family relative is responsible to marry her and continue the family legacy. Ruth approaches Boaz in the middle of the night to seduce him to bring about a child to inherit her dead husband. He insists that they first look at a closer relative, but if not, he promises to marry Ruth. The morning after the midnight barn rendezvous, Ruth goes to Boaz, who is sitting on the Beth Din. He's the head of the Beth Din. And the relative, who is the closest relative, happens to pass by coincidence. Since he happens to be there, Boaz suggests that he redeem the dead man's inheritance. Sure, he redeemed the field, he says, but whoa, hold on. He will not redeem Ruth. Why not? So this relative knew an age-old law that Moabites were not allowed to convert. Why? Because when the Jewish people were traveling through the desert and various lands to get from Egypt to the land of Israel, as was customary, each nation would greet them when they arrived at the border. They would greet them to show they were welcome to travel through the land and would be able to purchase food and water on their way. The Moabites were so stingy that they actually refused the Jewish people food and water for their passage. This character trait of real stinginess is so foreign to the Jewish people that anyone with this spiritual DNA could never convert. Well, actually, what the relative didn't know was that this only applies to the men. The women were not held responsible for greeting strangers and therefore would be allowed to convert. Ruth would be accepted as a convert. The relative uses this excuse. I can't ruin my family reputation by marrying Ruth. She'll ruin my name. How will I show my face in public again? He is so worried about his reputation, and ironically, the Megillah doesn't even mention his name. He is referred to as Mr. Anonymous. So he was worried about his name, and actually his name was erased. He had a chance to stand up and do what was right, and he missed it. He missed his chance. He comes in and fades out the stage of Jewish history. A man who's not willing to play the role that he was meant to in life. And he's never mentioned again. He's anonymous. So Mr. Anonymous does a legal transaction, and Boaz is now next of kin to redeem Ruth. Boaz and Ruth have a beautiful wedding. Ruth is blessed to be like Rachel and Leah, which shows that she was accepted to be like a daughter of Israel, a daughter of the Jewish people, a daughter of the Jewish foremothers. So they're married, and God intervenes, it says, actually, and Boaz gets her pregnant right away. And the rabbis say, actually, that Boaz died that very night. He had fulfilled his mission. But unlike Mr. Anonymous, Boaz's name is forever remembered as the man who did this absolutely altruistic act. He fulfilled his mission in life. The author actually tells us as if this baby boy is a child to Naomi, because he continues her family legacy. And we think this was the end. Mazel tov! But the Megillah doesn't end there. It continues to tell us that Ruth is the mother of royalty. We hear the whole family tree from Yehuda, son of Jacob, until King David. King David will be born from her lineage. Beautiful. And the reason this tells us that the child is born from the kingship of Yehuda. He's connected to Boaz, but really he's reconnected all the way back to Yehuda, because this child is monarchy in the messianic line. But why do we have to focus on this? Why does we have to talk about it? So it brings us to this last concept of why we read the book of Ruth on Shavuot. We read the book of Ruth on Shavuot because Shavuot is a holiday that celebrates the birth and the death of King David. It's the anniversary of King David. So we celebrate the connection. Happy birthday to King David. but really, it can't just be to celebrate a coincidence. In order to understand the connection to King David, we actually have to look at a strange secret transaction between Boaz and Ruth at night. But this will hopefully tie it all together. It's a little bit Kabbalistic, but really very beautiful. So we note this strange transaction at the end of the night in the barn. Boaz says to Ruth, go home before anyone sees you. But before he sends her home, he gives her 6 barleys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You would measure out a significant amount, but measuring out 6? So the Medrash asked the same question. The rabbis asked, is it the way of kings to give out only 6 barleys? And the answer is, in the merit of this, 6 righteous people descended from Ruth. What's going on here? He's measuring out barley, or he's measuring out people. What's going on? So the Jewish our spiritual makeup doesn't actually lend itself to having a king rule over us. We're programmed for unity. It doesn't always seem like it, but when push comes to shove, we are brothers and sisters. One person can't naturally bring himself to rule over the other. It's compared to the human body. You can't say the arm rules over the ear, right? We're all part of one unit, and no one can have the pride to rule over the others. There's humility amongst brothers. So we know that during the first attempt of crowning a king, for example, King Saul, he goes into hiding on the day of his coronation. He can't handle the attention and the honor. And even today, the real leaders don't lead because they've crowned themselves. Rather, people start to listen to them, and they become leaders almost by default of their followers. But the nation of Moab, that's another story. Moab's background is from Lot and his daughter. Lot and his daughters are saved from the destruction of Sodom, and his daughters think that they are the only people left in the world. All they can see is destruction. So they seduce their father and get pregnant. One daughter arrogantly names her son Moab, which means from my father. The original Moab, after whom this nation is named, their name shows that arrogance. They're not ashamed to name themselves after this act, and their essence is pride. So we see Boaz and Ruth have the character traits of their nation. Ruth, she is so strong. Your God is my God, she says. She goes gleaning in the field. She goes to Boaz and practically forces him to marry her. She's not only not ashamed, but she goes full speed ahead to get what she thinks is right. It seems like everything is stacked against her, actually. We look through our lens of cynicism and we think, a convert from Moab? But she saw opportunity. And this reminds me of a story about George Danzig. He was a math student who arrived late to class one day, and the professor was already speaking, but George quickly copied what he thought were two homework equations from the board. He handed them in a week later, and the teacher was shocked. George Danzig had solved what were till then unsolvable equations. But he didn't know this, so it didn't stop him. Where some might see difficulties, others see opportunities. They seize the moment. So we want to take part of this characteristic of arrogance from Moab and channel it into the Jewish people. King David will be the synthesis of Boaz and Ruth. Part of his spiritual makeup is proactiveness and a touch of arrogance and pride from Ruth. And Boaz is humble. He gives credit to God for all of his successes. And when Ruth comes to seduce him, as much as he wants to, he gives precedence to the other relative. But where do we really see Boaz's humility? And here is the really beautiful part. Boaz's name, broken into two, Boaz, means strength is in him. Boaz has the strength of kingship within him, the potential. He's a direct line from Yehudah, the tribe of kings. But he has no idea if he's actually going to be the one to marry her. In fact, it now seems like it will be the relative. So on a Kabbalistic level, when he gives her the barley, he relinquishes this potential. Boaz knew on a deep, deep level that he could bring forth 6 tzaddikim. But when he saw Ruth with her strength, this Moabite strength, channeled properly, embodied by her in the proper manner, he realized that she should be the one to parent King David and ultimately Mashiach. She had the ability to be the generator of the messianic line, the lineage of King David. So he gives over to her the lineage of the monarchy, saying to her with the barley, you are the one who needs to have these children, not me. This is absolute altruism, knowing that he's going to be out of the genealogy, but the ability to sacrifice his own desires. That's the character trait that balances her. What are the ultimate traits of kingship? Ruth's pride and Boaz's altruism. An elderly sage once taught that every person should have 2 pieces of paper, one in each pocket. One note should say, Anochi afal va'efer, I am dust of the earth. The other pocket's note says, Bishvili nivra olam, an entire world was created for me. On the one hand, humility, and on the other, empowerment. The trick, he said, is to know when to take out each one. So the story of Ruth tells us about the birth of David, because this is really where the story goes. The conversion of Ruth and her subsequent marriage to Boaz, the reason this all happened that we hear about it is for King David to be born as a synthesis of their characters of humility and empowerment. But how can I internalize this? How does this apply to my life, to all of us? Because actually, Ruth coming from Moab teaches us that this is actually not just a Jewish story. The goal, certainly for Messianic times, is for everyone to be part of this. Everyone connected to godliness. It's universal. Because everyone can expand themselves in our thought process, in our plans for ourselves. There is infinite room in a spiritual reality. Ruth makes a decision to recreate herself and move forward. And after that, she doesn't stop. But we don't see that in her descendants. We see in David a a person who has huge vision, aspiring to be as great can be, tremendous aspirations as Cain. But he makes grave, grave mistakes, miscalculations. There's a strong desire, but in the moment of important decisions and pressures and other considerations, he makes mistakes. And each time he makes a mistake, he immediately recognizes, Chatati, I have sinned. Man is created in order to recognize God. We have the ability to choose this, but we also make mistakes. We can also deny God, even for one sinful moment. So in theory, we could come to a situation where in humanity, there is no one who recognizes God. So we need to have people who are always there to remind us. That's Ruth's role. Because maybe like King David, we'll all make mistakes and we'll be lost. And then the world will be lost to spirituality. But no, there's forgiveness. People get forgiven so that there's opportunity to grow, to yearn, to become like Ruth, the role model. In real life, we're not like Ruth on a trajectory. David really is the model for everyone to make a mistake and admit it and then move forward. We need a focus though, and Ruth is that focus. Even David will sin, but he will get up again and again. This ability comes from his convictions, but because we all have a seed of Ruth who recognized that there was nowhere else to be except with God. So we pick up and try again. David is our reality, and he's the chain to the universal redemption of all mankind. Everyone can recreate themselves. Everyone can pick themselves up. We all have an ability to come under God's wing, as Ruth describes. Ruth is the prototype, and David is the fallible role model. Keep going. Use Ruth as a beacon and get up again. Persevere. And that's the path to ultimate redemption. The playing field is equal. Mashiach doesn't come from perfection. It comes from two poor women, a stranger, picking up leftovers in the field, begging to be accepted, but staying proud and knowing that she has a purpose. But it shows everyone, we can do this. We can do this. Sheva yipol tzaddik v'kam. A righteous person falls 7 times and gets up. Traditionally, this is understood that a righteous man has the wherewithal to get up. Maybe. But to me, it really means that a person becomes righteous because they get up. Greatness doesn't come from above. It starts at the bottom. It's built from the bottom up. And like King David says, I have sinned, but to get up over and over again with a vision of Ruth's perseverance, then we become great. And that brings us to the last name of Shavuot, Chag HaAtzeret. Atzeret means to stop. And we usually understand this to mean to stop counting, because we've been counting the days from the Exodus, from Passover to Shavuot, the giving of the Torah. But on a deeper level, this holiday celebrates our ability to stop, to put in boundaries. Atzeret means I can stop and hold back, to hold back my desires for what's right and good. Of course, often what we want is what's right and good thing to do. But it's easy to get caught up in the go-get-it mentality of society, push myself forward, how to get what you want out of a relationship. Yes, but sometimes what I want is not what's best. It's not for the greater good. It's not good for the relationship. People prioritize the physical to the detriment of the spiritual. People prioritize their own spiritual over someone else's. We have to know when's the time to say stop. Even if you think it's holy, even if the Torah says it's not, then you have to curb your desire. If you're ready to give up and you say, this isn't for me, then stop. Stop this desire for mediocrity or for laziness. Maybe for you it's enough, but it's not enough for the world. The Torah heeds us to be greater than just little old me. And altruism is very rare. People even question its existence. But we can sometimes see a person that holds themselves back with no gain, purely for someone else or purely for a cause. Atzeret teaches us that sometimes we need to put in limits. Not everything we desire is good, and those boundaries need to be in place. Boaz shows an incredible ability to hold back his desires, to give up his place in the messianic line. And to summarize it all, really, Shavuot is the day that we embrace greatness. Torah challenges us to not just be a good person, but rather a great person. In each of the chapters of Ruth, she serves as a mirror for us to look at ourselves and question, are we living up to the ideal? Are we striving for greatness? In chapter 1, Naomi is so passive, and Ruth cries out, your God is my God, your people are my people. She is absolutely connected. And we too need to stand up and say, this is the right thing to do. See a situation and grab it. Zman matan Toratenu, it's the time of the giving of the Torah. God reaches out to us daily, constantly, as he did at Mount Sinai. And we step up to the challenge to connect with him. We see God in our lives and we actively build this emotional relationship connection with him. In chapter 2, as the story continues, we see how Ruth teaches everyone how to become real givers, to love. Not just what's required, but to give in a big way, chesed, loving kindness, to give from your kishkas, to do what's right without worrying about public opinion, to give with joy. Chag HaBikurim, the festival of first fruits, we are the new fruit. We renew ourselves by maximizing all of our spiritual opportunities. In chapter 3, the seduction in the barn, Ruth forces us to reflect on our past in order to forge forward to the future. Greatness comes when we acknowledge mistakes and act differently in the future. We make a commitment to be even better than we have been. Shavuot, meaning oaths. God makes an oath, and so do we. God swears to forever love us and be with us. And we swear and make a commitment to godliness and greatness. And finally, the ascent to the throne. True greatness, when we can be humble and altruistic. Atzeret is a festival of stopping our personal desires and exchanging them for a spiritual desire. To hold our egos back, but not let that hold us back, to be proactive. You can stay in your isolated physical space, but the spiritual expanse calls us to act, to look around, to see what needs doing, and to lean in. And even when we fail, to look towards Ruth as a role model and get up as King David did, and in this way, be great. May we celebrate the festival of Shavuot. I wish for you deep aspirations of goodness and plans to achieve greatness.